Hi everyone, welcome back to the Martingale Emerging Media Minute or Two. This week's readings, again, were about COVID-19, but the focus this time was more so on how to successfully spread information during the pandemic, as well as staying in line with the idea of fact-checking and stopping the spread of misinformation. During the pandemic, a lot of the information that was trustworthy and reliable and really needed to be spread more came from government organizations such as the CDC. In an article by Highland Wood et al., they outlined 10 tips for the government to effectively communicate with the public. The 10 tips are to engage in clear communication, strive for maximum credibility, communicate with empathy, communicate with openness, frankness, and honesty, recognize that uncertainty is inevitable, account for levels of health literacy and numeracy, empower people to act, appeal to social norms, consider diverse community needs, and be proactive in combating misinformation. Now, two trends that stick out in this list is the idea that we cannot completely avoid misinformation and fake news, so there needs to be steps in place to address those. And also there needs to be transparency. The government needs to be upfront with what is going on with the pandemic. They can't just give out, the good, happy news. They have to give out the terrible statistics about death rates and all of the side effects that are occurring so that the public trusts them when they see good information or tips to stay safe. Another thing I liked about this article is that it identified groups that need to be targeted more in this content. They include young children, secondary school children, young adults, older adults, which means 70 plus, Indigenous people, gender diverse LGBTQ communities, people affected by natural disasters, people with life-threatening conditions, and the hearing and vision impaired communities. This was a really nice part of the article because a lot of times these communities are the ones that are impacted more than the rest, yet they're left out of the general targeting for marketing information to help the public. One example of when misinformation was super harmful was during the rollout of vaccines. Nobody was really sure what was happening because vaccines often take 8 years or more to be rolled out. However, these were coming out within a year of the pandemic beginning. So people were obviously cautious. However, some countries were really negative in response to the rollout more than others. In addition, women tended to be a lot more negative in their sentiments towards the vaccine rollout than men were. This is coming from an article by Ansari and Khan called Worldwide COVID-19 Vaccines Sentiment Analysis through Twitter Content. Now, the United States showed an overall negative sentiment towards the COVID vaccine rollout. However, some countries showed much more positive sentiments. Given that we are not fully out of the pandemic and may never be, it is important for the government to consider going forward how they can implement marketing tactics or just general communication tactics in order to help people receive information that will benefit the global community. An article by Hamaguchi, Nematolahi, and Minter, they talk about how visual aids are extremely effective in spreading information. They use the example of hashtag flatten the curve to exemplify how people were able to see a visual representation of how their actions can help lower COVID cases in their country. Another example of when visual aids have been super helpful in my experience is when looking at things like electoral maps and seeing which countries are lighting up blue and red on election day and being able to see where those votes are coming from. Generally, visual aids are very helpful because it makes things that seem a little bit more abstract or too big of a picture a lot more tangible. I really like this quote from the article where the authors wrote, "COVID-19 has not only caused great human suffering, but also shed light on a rapidly evolving information ecosystem that demands creative solutions for equitable, accessible public health communication." Obviously, this pandemic killed many people, and a lot of people are still suffering long-term consequences from contracting the disease. But we also learned a lot about our information ecosystem, as they say. And my hope is that if something happens in the future, whether it's a natural disaster, a pandemic, anything, that we can learn how to more quickly address things such as fake news and spread information in a way that people are able to understand it and believe it. My challenge for you this week is to go find an infographic about a topic that you really care about or consider to be important and share it on your social media or send it to your family or in a group message where you think people will benefit from this information. And hopefully it's presented in a way that they can read it and quickly gain a lot of information that they did not have before. Thanks, and I'll see you next week.